Address on our key domain of teacher leadership for sustainable development. It is my pleasure to invite distinguished Professor Heila Lotz-Sisitka. She is a distinguished professor at Rhodes University, and she holds a prestigious Tier 1 South African National Research Foundation and a Department of Science and Technology chair in Global Change and Social Learning Systems at Rhodes University. She was also the principal investigator for the UNESCO Sustainability Starts with Teachers program, which built capacity of teacher educators in 11 SADC countries. And so she's quite familiar with the territory, and she's coordinating the Africa component of our project. Thank you very much, and I welcome Professor Sisitka to give us a keynote address.
Thank you so much, Prof. Shumba, and good morning to everybody. What a wonderful turnout. It's amazing to see the level of interest in this work that I think we've all been working on for a very long time, and it's just lovely to see, you know, the next stage of this work growing so beautifully. So thank you also to Daniel for the introduction, to Wilma and Prof. Shumba for organizing everything, to our EU colleagues, and of course to all of our colleagues from across the continent. It's lovely to see so many of you here. If you are happy with it, I might switch my video off just because the internet here is a little bit not that fabulous. So if it's okay with you, I'll just switch off the video. Unfortunately, I'm in transit. I'm not in my office. So that's why I'm a bit nervous about the video. Okay. So let me start. I've been asked to sort of give a bit of an introduction to ESD teacher leadership. And I thought, well, let's ask the question, where do we start? Because, of course, we need to, you know, think about what we mean by this concept, but also where we start with a concept like this. I think Daniel's given us a good overview of the program and some of the things we're intending to do. But I guess we could ask this question. I think he also pointed a bit to that, is why we need ESD teacher leaders. And of course, one of the main reasons is that we only have one planet, and we know that this is a planet that is under incredible pressure. It's under pressure from carbon emissions that we seem to be unable to stop producing. Our ecosystems are under pressure. Our human systems are under pressure. We have still extreme inequalities, and they're getting worse. And we also have these surprises, the extreme weather events that are now exacerbating everything. And they, of course, all intersect and produce very challenging conditions. And so what's happened is that the whole world has kind of tried to work together to build these SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that we can all work together on to try to resolve some of these massive challenges. And at the center of it for us lies ESD. So we really want to build a leadership that can do this work in response to the major challenges. And just to say that this is a very, very real challenge in Africa and in Southern Africa particularly, but actually across our continent. Here's just one of the reports that came out of Cyclone Freddy and its enormous impact across 3 countries. Can you imagine that a cyclone will just sweep across 3 countries, devastate communities, homes, schools, roads, infrastructure, where things are already stressed? We're sitting with quite a huge, big challenge that we need to respond to, and we need to do it proactively. So, and we're doing this in a context, I'm sorry for a bit of background noise. It's just, I'm not in my office, as I said. So, I think we're also dealing with the challenge that the education systems that we've built were not built for these challenges that we're trying to deal with now. They were built actually to drive the imperial, the colonial, the apartheid, the industrial, and now these data development projects. And so we need to really think about what is transformative and what is transformative learning in these contexts that we're talking about. We have new policy on the horizon and quite progressive thinking. One of the documents that I really like, I think it's giving us a lot of direction, is this document from UNESCO, which is looking at reimagining our futures together and it's asking for a new social contract for education. And this document is actually reframing the purpose of education away from human capital theory, which was driving that old project, towards asking us for a new purpose. And that purpose is to think about both human well-being and planetary well-being and the relationship between them. So it's a very interesting time for us to be doing this work that we're trying to do. We have, of course, the SDGs. Daniel's just given us a good quick update on those. We're not making the progress we were planning to. And so the efforts we need to make, we need to strengthen. We have the Africa Agenda 2063, which has got a commitment to sustainable development. We have our continental education strategy for Africa. It says we would like to not only own the global sustainable development goals, but we want to adapt them and make them compatible with our own aspirations. And it's from this statement that we started to work with the change projects in the Sustainability Starts with Teachers course, because we thought we need to define what change we need, and we need to be able to develop that together in our institutions, with our communities, with our students, with our partners, and make these sustainable development goals live in the context that we find ourselves. So we also been working very closely, as Daniel mentioned, with SDG4, especially target 4.7, because that is the target that requires all of the countries. Come back in. Can you hear me, Wilma, Prof. Shumba?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Heila.
Sorry, the internet's a bit unstable. Okay, so I was just talking about the importance of the cultural foundations of education and the cultural foundations of ESD as being very important for us in Africa. And the other thing we need to think about is our continent and the education we're providing for the future. And, you know, by 2015, half of the world's children will live in Africa. So we have an incredibly youthful continent, amazing capacity, innovation, creativity in our young people. And we have to ask whether our institutions are actually preparing to support these children and young people to live and work in a more complex world under these rapidly changing conditions that we've been talking about. So this is a challenge for teacher education, and I love this quote from UNESCO. It says, "Teachers stand at the forefront of localized change, introducing students to the knowledge, skills, values, and abilities to act sustainably, live together peacefully, and build a more sustainable society and a more just society." So what then do we know about teachers and ESD, and what leadership do we actually need? And UNESCO recently in 2021 did this big international survey, and I thought I would bring us some perspectives from the international survey. Daniel's mentioned that we've just done a big regional survey, which Shua Manoa
Heila, we have lost you.
I have turned everybody's videos off just to help us a bit with the bandwidth. And we'll maybe just give Heila a couple of minutes to rejoin.
Okay.
Otherwise,
you.
Akis will continue.
Sorry, guys, I cut off again. I think this is quite an issue that we all experience a lot, so it's not unusual. So
You are back.
can you
can continue.
hear me again? Sorry, Prof. Shumba. I'm just saying this is not unusual, right? It happens to us all of the time on the continent.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So let me carry on. Okay, so what we also see in this particular study from UNESCO is that there are some insights into teaching and teacher education, which is of course important for us. And what we've discovered, what the study talks about as well, is it says that teachers feel more confident in teaching cognitive skills, and they feel less confident and knowledgeable about action learning and the social emotional perspectives, especially in ESD. So this is an important insight for us as well. And the interesting point also is that by doing ESD, teachers are going beyond traditional assessment methods. So Daniel mentioned assessment earlier, and this is an interesting finding, I think. And teachers also report that teacher education is insufficiently covering these topics that they have to teach: sustainable consumption and production and climate change. So also interesting for us to note. Then there's some perspectives on collaboration and cooperation in this report. And the teachers are saying that they want a whole school approach and they want more involvement from the wider community, also very useful for us. And that teachers most often cooperate with internal networks that are made up of other teachers within their schools, but also with communities. And that one of the findings of the study is that better collaboration between countries and regions can improve humanity's ability to address these big global and local environmental threats. So this is very important for us as well, as a big network that we're trying to build here, this collaboration between us. The other insight from the report is on multidimensional learning. And it really says that if we only teach about these issues, it's not going to strengthen and foster the attitudes and values and actions or behaviors that are necessary to help students to become responsible and proactive global citizens. So the report comes back to this multidimensional learning that I mentioned earlier, the cognitive learning, the social and emotional learning, and then it talks about behavioral learning, but I always change it to action learning. And that is because in Africa, we've had so much impact of behaviorism that we don't want to reproduce behaviorism in our work on ESD. So I always change it to action learning, and you'll see me doing that consistently in the slides. And I've already also told UNESCO that we should not be promoting behaviorism in ESD. We should be thinking about, you know, a more open concept of action, because action strengthens agency for change. So this is important, and agency for change is a collective concept, not an individualized concept. So these multidimensional facets of learning are really important also for how we approach teacher leadership and what we include in our courses. You can see here the model is again, and there in the center is this multidimensional approach to learning: cognitive, social, and emotional. And there's the behavioral, I would say rather action learning dimension. And if we can integrate these to teach these SDGs, then I think we can do quite a lot of work in education. So there's also insight into the whole school approach and the importance of that. And the whole school approach is one that can include both the, you know, the school life, the operations, the relations with the community. So as we think about change projects, whole institution approaches are particularly powerful. And we've seen that in the Sustainability Starts with Teachers program as well. Then there's also a lot of support that we're getting from especially UNESCO, but also from other institutions on how to think about this kind of practice. They also talk about that in the report. And then they talk a lot about assessment. I think Daniel mentioned assessment and the need to strengthen alternative forms of assessment. So here you can see what the teachers were saying about assessment. They say that, interdisciplinary assessment is not well supported. We don't assess extracurricular activities. Teachers are not trained in interdisciplinary assessment. And there's a lack of assessment tools or guidelines. So I think everybody will be very happy to know that in the course we're going to run, we will include a strong focus on assessment. We're building on what we did in the Sustainability Starts with Teachers course. The leadership of Prof. Shumba, Caleb, Mandikonza, and others on this assessment work is crucial for us in Africa. So they do talk quite a bit in the report about the importance of transforming assessment, because to use an old model of assessment when we're trying to teach in a different way is not going to work. So we need to change our assessment methods, our assessment frameworks. We've been doing some lovely work also on how to integrate living heritage with assessment and to build a model of assessment for flourishing. John Burakeni has been helping us with that together with Caleb. We're also doing it with UNESCO. So these are the tools we have. We'll share them with everybody as we go along, but you can see the importance of this particular type of work. Then they also talk about professional development, and they talk about the importance of high quality professional development and teacher training. And this is, of course, the work of our teacher education institution. So as we do training of trainers, as we run courses for ourselves to learn how to train our teachers better and the next generation of teachers, let's put high quality on the agenda and let's work together to create the best quality that we can. So again, these issues of action learning and socio-emotional are not well covered in teacher education. So we need to build that in. We should also build in opportunities for collaboration. So the community of practice model is very, very important. And then we should also consult with teachers, teacher representatives, so that what we develop in our programs and our change projects is not just done by us for others, but that is rather done with the people we want to work with. So in this report, the final point that's made actually by the Director General of UNESCO, it says the message is clear. Teachers need more support from schools, training institutions, communities, education systems, and governments at all levels if they are to succeed in imbuing the next generation with the principles and behaviors or actions that enable the building of more sustainable ways of life. So that's, I think, just a very clear message from that UNESCO report. And I really wanted to share it with you because I think it helps us to see what we're doing here from Africa in relation to these global findings. And if Manoa is on the platform, Manoa, it would be really good to look at the findings from our survey and see what we can learn from this global survey and see how we can build a fuller picture of what we need to do with ESD. So where do we find these ESD teacher leaders, right? And of course, we find them everywhere. We can't think that we're going to only find them in one place, right? And so if we find ESD leaders, teacher leaders everywhere, then we need to adopt a distributive leadership approach. And Zintle is busy building a lovely module for us on distributive leadership for ESD teacher leadership. And this is a nice approach because it's not about hierarchical management. It's more about collaboration across an institution. It's about multiple people working together to make decisions, to build a collective mindset, a system of synergy, to create a culture within an organization that values creativity, cooperation, and success, and to allow multiple voices to be heard. We need to hear our students' voices. We need to hear our community voices. We need to hear the institutional leaders' voices. We need to hear the education department voices. We need to hear all of these voices so that we can build a proper system of ESD teacher leadership that is well connected to the society and to the communities. Multiple viewpoints need to be used to solve problems. There's no body that's got the ultimate solution for these complex problems. We all have to work on them together. So that's why this model of leadership is very, very, very useful. So it's for distributed leadership, we need shared vision and goals. We need to invest in and create conditions for trust building. We need to have transparency and shared decision-making, clear roles and responsibilities, but also flexibility to negotiate change. We need shared monitoring, reflection, and reflexivity, and we need an attitude of collaboration, kindness, and helpfulness. And we need to help each other when needed, and we need to avoid competition. So this is what the distributed leadership model brings to us, and we think we can work very, very nicely with it in this particular program. And just this little image shows, you know, the difference between centralized leadership, decentralized leadership, and distributed leadership. In other words, everybody is a leader, but perhaps bringing something different to the whole leadership story that we need to build. Here's another little model which summarizes distributed leadership. It's about collective action, collaborative decision-making, and shared leadership. So I hope that that's quite inspiring for us as we move forward. And I know that Zintle is working together with Wilma and others to build very nice module for us on distributed leadership, distributed teacher leadership for ESD. But of course, we need to build this distributed leadership in and through our communities of practice. We have to be able to work with others in our context around shared practice. So when we think about communities of practice, of course, there's a whole lot of scholarship on it. Etienne Wenger is the big name in this area. And he says that whenever you're in a community of practice, you are working together on a domain of practice. In other words, an area of shared interest and key issues. So the shared interest is very important. The key issues is very important. You need to build a body of knowledge, methods, tools to do your practice. And you need to work in community where you build relationships through discussion, activities, learning, trust building, all of those things that I talked about. So there's a lot of scholarship on communities of practice, and we can research our communities of practice, right? Because we are all academics working in higher education. So it would be wonderful for us to research also what we are doing together here as a big community of practice, but then also with these smaller communities of practice in our context. And there's quite a lot of literature on, you know, the relationship between just a work team, in other words, a department that's working together, compared to a community of practice, which is, you know, a group which may be bigger than the department, could be include the communities, the students, and so on. And then also there's bigger networks that communities of practice are part of. And you can see that these are more or less structured, you know, more or less informal. So I think it's helpful for us to see some of these models because we can then think about distributed leadership in communities of practice. There's, of course, a lot of benefits and value for working with communities of practice. You can see it matches the idea of distributive ESD leadership. It's got long-term value, short-term value. It's got value for members. It's got value for organizations. And one of the things we're going to do in this program is also try to assess the value that it is creating for everybody. And we'll do that in a participatory approach to monitoring and evaluation. I really like this little diagram of communities of practice because it shows us, you know, how they form. So people come together around a common purpose. They start to build trust in order to share their knowledge and through that develop their shared practice, which then creates, you know, cognitive collective intelligence, which I like as well, and enables then systems of influence. So you can see the kind of movement and growth of over time and how it actually starts to, you know, shape. And then it has also different role players that do different things at different times in the community of practice.
Was unmuted. Okay.
This is also another little model that shows how communities of practice form, their stages of development in communities of practice. So people kind of need to find each other, discover their commonalities, explore the connections, what they want to do together, become active in doing their practice together. And over time, you know, the community of practice might disperse, people might still stay in touch, they'll hold reunions, and they'll have memories of the communities of practice. So this is also from the Wenger research, where they're talking about cultivating communities of practice and how we can actually support the development of communities of practice, which is, of course, what we want to do in the ESD leadership program. So here is another little diagram which shows, again, the forming and the maturing, the self-sustaining nature of communities of practice and the transformation role that these communities of practice play. And then the little dotted line here shows that when you start off with communities of practice, it's important to invest in input, support, right? Collective support. And in this program, we're going to do that through the sustainability starts with teacher leaders courses, the training of trainers, the community of practice activities, and we're going to help ourselves, right, and each other to build these communities of practice so that they can become self-sustaining and transformational. And we have 3 years to do this, as Daniel's already told us. So we're in a good place now. We can make a good start and keep going. Okay, so what I then wanted to look at is what do ESD teacher leaders do? And this is, of course, important because we need to think about, well, what are we going to do together, right, as ESD teacher leaders? And I found this amazing little, when I was doing my research on communities of practice, I really like it because it's called a community action wheel. And what this researcher did, Azur, he documented, right, what the community of practice was doing, its actions, the action wheel. And then he identified sort of core actions, and then he identified the different sub-actions that belong to the core actions. And then I thought to myself, well, what would it look like if we translated this into an ESD teacher leaders action wheel through our actions in this community of practice and the communities of practice that we work with on the ground. And so what would our communities of practice be doing using their distributed leadership approach? So what is the action that we want to do? What is the action wheel that we want to build as a big network? So if we put ourselves at the center and we start to think about, well, what is it that ESD teacher leaders do? We can look around us and we can learn from our experience already. I think Overson mentioned that we've been working together already for many years, actually. Done a lot of work in the Sustainability Starts with Teachers program, which ran over 11 countries. Somebody just mute the colleagues that are...
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find.
Yes. Okay. So we worked with this program with UNESCO, the UNESCO regional office for Southern Africa, across 11 countries, and we were trying to build ESD capacity, very similar to what we're doing now. And in fact, when this Erasmus Plus call came, we said we want to build on this many years of experience that we have in the Southern African region. We're not inventing a new wheel, we're building on and we're improving and we're expanding what we've already learned how to do and how to do together in Africa. And this is not just Southern Africa, it's been across the continent. We have been working together for almost 20, 30 years now. I think Dorcas and I were saying the other day, I think we met each other in the early 90s, right, Dorcas? So this is a long-term project that we've been working on, and we really want to use this opportunity that we're now building with our German colleagues and colleagues in Europe to strengthen this history of work. So we can learn from what we've done already in this particular program, what it is that teacher leaders do. We learned a lot through this model that we developed, which was an action learning model and centered around a change project. And you can hear from Daniel that we're going to continue with that work. We don't want to leave the change projects because we've discovered that they're incredibly powerful and important for producing change in our institutions, our communities, and they're a very good vehicle for ESD practice to emerge. So we've done a lot of work on ESD change projects and to understand them better, how to support them. and also what they are. And an ESD change project is really a kind of project that supports transformation of education and society. It develops the role of education and training in contributing to a more sustainable, just society for current and future generations. Sometimes they center around these, you see, we even turned the SDGs into positive actions here for change. So we said, instead of you just have SDG 6, we want SDG 6, which is to help us to love water, right? We need to love water on our continent. We need to take climate action. We need to heal the earth. We need to build living cities. We need to celebrate equality. So we try to build the SDGs into this very positive, action-orientated approach that can help us to build change projects. So this is something we can carry forward as we build this next version of our work together. And we said that it should always have a clear transformative learning ESD thrust. So we've also learned a lot on how to assess and evaluate these change projects, and we developed a very nice tool, which we call the value creation framework, which comes from the communities of practice literature and from the work of Etienne Wenger. And he developed a tool which helps us to understand the value that's created over time through these kind of change processes. So we look at immediate value, potential value, applied value, realized value, reframing value, and we can capture what these projects actually mean to us in our institution. We, as I said, developed this sort of program of support around the change projects, which we're going to continue to do and we're going to continue to build on. We're building new modules that Daniel mentioned, especially to strengthen our understandings of the change projects and also to strengthen our understandings of ESD leadership. And then we can still draw on some of the previous experience and knowledge and materials that we have also had. And we are reworking some of the best that we could learn from that program into this particular program. And just look at what these teacher educators were able to do, right, through this change project approach. Here's one group in Lesotho that are creating a sustainable green energy biogas digester for their campus and community. Here is another group integrating ESD into the industrial attachment program in Zimbabwe. Here's another group which is building eco offices in Lusaka at the University of Zambia. Here's another group which is building an indigenous botanical garden in and around the college. Here's another one that is producing organic herbs for home economics kitchens to teach home economics in the teacher education college. There's another group working on the biosphere and indigenous knowledge practices. And there are many, many, many others. In fact, we've been able to document about 150 change projects from the SST program. And we've now been reflecting on those. I think we've just written a paper for a book that is part of the UNESCO UNITWIN network that Daniel is also coordinating for us. So one of the things that we've been trying to understand also is, well, what is the significance of this work? And here's our dean, Professor Jurita Rosenberg. She's a long-standing leader in the field of ESD. And she joined us in one graduation ceremony, and she said, we have to look at what are we doing when it comes to teacher education policy on the continent. And she introduced us to the African Teacher Qualification Framework for Teacher Quality, Comparability, and International Mobility. It's an AU framework, and it actually has standards and competencies for the teaching profession. So Professor Shumba and Zintle and another part of our group have been looking at these standards and competencies, building on this, lead that Jurita gave us. And she said, you guys need to do a better job of looking at what you're doing in relation to these standards. So we built that into our Erasmus Plus project to be a key focus of what we do together. So it will be in one of our modules as well. And you can see here there's different domains that the African Union is requesting our teachers develop in terms of their competencies and standards. And Jurita pulled out these for us in domain 3. Look at the role model competencies of a teacher. A teacher should be able to develop awareness and understanding of developments that affect the community, the country, and the planet. For example, climate change, sustainable development, global citizenship, amongst others. So you can see this ESD work is actually in the continental standards for teacher competencies. So we really want to develop that aspect of the work forward further in order to develop a strong view of what is ESD teacher leadership in relation to these African Union teacher standards. So here we are also looking then at these competencies in more detail. Here's just some more of them. I won't read through it, but at another point, I think it will be good if Zintle and Prof. Shumba can also share with all of you on this network the analysis that they've done so far on ESD and these competencies and how we can take this work forward. So very important work that's going on there. And then what we've also been doing, in fact, I was doing this yesterday, I was preparing for this presentation. I was thinking, do we know how ESD leaders, teacher leaders can lead change? So if we look back at all of this experience, what can we learn from what we've been doing? And how can we think about how this is done, right? And what do we know already and what do we still have to learn, of course? And then this project allows us that space, right, for the next 3 to 4 years is to build our understanding of this, how ESD teacher leaders can lead change to strengthen these AU teacher professional standards implementation in Africa. So then I thought, well, some of the reflections is that ESD teacher leaders lead with relationality, with Ubuntu ethics and care for self, others, and the environment. So the ethics is super important in this work, and it shines through all the time. If you look at all of those change projects, they are driven actually by this kind of leadership with relationality, Ubuntu ethics, and care. ESD teacher leaders lead with good quality knowledge of complex sustainability issues, and they action viable solutions with others. In other words, they don't only just talk about the problems, they actually action the viable solutions with others. But to do that, they need good quality knowledge. So we focus also on good quality knowledge in the programs and to support the ESD teacher leaders to develop this knowledge. ESD teacher leaders lead with reflexivity and humility. They assess the value of what that they are creating and how it can be done better. They do this with others. ESD teacher leaders, they lead with multidimensional teaching, cognitive, social, emotional, and action-orientated. Transformative learning is at the heart of their practice. They teach for meaning and they assess for significant learning. And we have some beautiful examples that we will also be able to, I think, bring into the training programs and share with you that we can also learn from and then build on as we go forward. And ESD teacher leaders, this is another very strong feature of their practice. They lead with engaged approaches and community involvement. They respect and mobilize heritage knowledge in relation to other forms of knowledge, local knowledge, scientific knowledge, and they are expert community of practice builders, okay, because this work can't be done alone. So we've got a lot to draw on, a lot to learn from. And then I was thinking, well, what would our wheel look like, our ESD teacher leaders action wheel look like for Africa? And can we build this together as we go forward? And I just put a few ideas in here from these reflections. You know, the practicing of ethics of care and Ubuntu relations, engaging and building sustainable communities, collaboration in communities of practice, implement ESD change projects, action transformative learning and assessment. You see, so we can begin to see what these key actions are that we want to get ourselves involved in, and we can build this picture together. And I would really like to invite all of you to join us in building this picture. And if we can make it available and more visible, it will help all of us in all of our teacher education institutions to move this very important agenda forward. So then the question is, how do we better support ESD teacher leaders? And I'm going to not go into the detail here because Daniel's given us a sense already. Wilma will tell us what's happening in the courses when she speaks to them. So I'll leave that up to them. And then I think Daniel's already mentioned that we are trying to build an Africa EU ESD teacher leaders network. And we could, of course, expand that over time to other continents as well. And we are working already with a very rich system of partners. Just look at all of us here. University of Crete, Frederick University, RCE Crete, Heidelberg University, Rhodes University, our Unit 1 network, Kenyatta University, Wits, Zambia, so many of us, Namibia, Lufania, and so on. There's lots of us, and we are growing, right? As I can see, we now have 127 people here with us today, and all of you are welcome. So thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm really sorry about the background noise. I hope it hasn't been too disturbing, and also the internet cuts. So thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. Shumba. Thank you, Vilma.
Thank you, Professor. And it's always amazing when we listen to you and you simplify very abstract concepts and make them very practical. Thank you very much for the presentation and for giving us the challenge on the ESD Teacher Leaders Action Wheel for Africa. I think it's quite an important challenge which we have to